Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. As an elite level runner and coach, I'm excited to introduce you to the All In Running Club. The All In Running Club exists to help you become a better runner. Whether you're a beginner, an elite runner, or anywhere in between, the mission of the All In Running Club is to give you the tools you need to find your success in running. Join today to take advantage of the 75% off yearly membership rate offer. Click the link below in the show notes to learn more. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Nelson, for being a guest on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Thanks, Jerry. It's great to be here.
So I'm really excited to talk to you about the connection between our emotional issues and traumas and all the things in our overall health, because a lot of people don't understand that connection. And even those that do understand it don't necessarily, I think, understand how deep it goes. Right. But so before we get into all that, tell us a little bit about yourself as far as how did you get into wanting to help people in this way?
Well, let's see. Well, first of all, I had a couple of really interesting experiences. I was born to some wonderful parents who were childhood sweethearts. And my mother was, my father was very much the entrepreneur. My mother was very interested in natural healing. In fact, when I was a kid growing up, my mother was referred to by people as kind of a health nut. Mm-hmm. And this was back in the day when if you actually took vitamins, you were considered to be a nut. I mean, there was a time. But the interesting thing about it is she was very studious, very open. She was very, very smart. I mean, when I became a chiropractor, along with both my brothers and both my brothers-in-law, when we would run into her, we would tell her about new things we were learning, et cetera. And she always already knew everything. She was smart. So anyway, I had some interesting experiences when I was a kid. When I was 7 years old, I had kidney disease not kidney disease. That was at 13. Okay. But when I was 7 years old, I had the measles and I was very sick. And I'd heard my parents talking about the plan, and the plan was that I was going to be going into the hospital the next day, and I was going into something called an oxygen tent. I didn't know what that meant.
Yep.
But I was miraculously, instantaneously healed. My mother asked my father to pray for me, and I'm lying there feeling really sick and really nauseated and just feeling really ill. And in the middle of this short prayer that my father is offering, this change started at the top of my head and it went through my body, and I was just instantly healed. And I've never forgotten that. I mean, I remember like it happened yesterday, because it's just such an impossible kind of thing.
Right.
To be, to go from being really sick to being totally well instantaneously is bizarre, but I've experienced that. So I learned a couple things from that. I learned that there's a higher power we can draw upon, apparently an unseen power. We can ask for help and get it. Right. And I also learned that healing doesn't have to necessarily take a long time, because it happened to me instantly.
Right.
So then I developed kidney disease when I was 13, and there was nothing that Western medicine had to offer, but I was actually able to get well very quickly through the efforts of some holistic doctors. So I decided that's what I wanted to be.
Okay.
And that's what I wanted to do with my life. Well, when I went to chiropractic school. When I got into practice, I decided that I could use some help from that unseen power. And so I developed this habit of asking for help. Before I'd go to work with somebody, I would just silently ask for help from up above, from God, and we all have different names for God, and that's fine.
Yep.
But I'll tell you something, Jerry, there were times during the years I was in practice, and I practiced for roughly a couple of decades, when somebody would come in to see me and I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know how to approach their problem, wouldn't know how to help them. And so in answer to that silent request for help, information would sometimes just flood in.
Yeah.
like an avalanche about what to do and how to look at this. And here's what's really going on. And that was amazing. That didn't happen very often, but it did happen. And so as time went on, one of the things that I learned was that all of my patients, no matter how young or old they were, no matter what they were suffering from, they all had something in common. And that I finally figured out was their emotional baggage. In other words, all my patients had energy stuck in their bodies from the emotional experiences that they had been through. What I found was that that emotional baggage from when they were being bullied as a child or from their divorce or whatever it might have been was actually creating noticeable physical and mental and emotional symptoms for them. So in other words, pain, I saw, 90% of the physical pain that people had an emotional basis to it, which was crazy. Because as a chiropractor, that was most of what I was seeing. Most of the people that came in had some kind of physical pain. And I found that just by releasing the emotional energy from whatever it was that they'd experienced, sometimes decades before, that pain would just poof, go away, often just instantly. It was wild. And so as time went on, I saw more and more of this kind of thing. And I realized that this emotional baggage, or in other words, the energy of these emotions that was stuck in people's bodies, was also a contributing factor to every single disease process that I saw. Because during the last 10 years that I was in practice, most of the people that I saw had actually been told that there was no hope for them, that they'd never get well, that they were dealing with an incurable disease. And I found that in every single one of those people, there was an emotional component. Sometimes, and of course, that emotional component was being completely ignored and missed by Western medicine, right?
Right.
But sometimes that emotional component was the biggest component of their whole situation, their whole disease.
Yeah.
So the vast majority of those people were able to get well. But I realized how huge the emotional aspect of our health is. But not only all kinds of diseases, but I mean things like depression and anxiety and phobias and panic attacks and PTSD and eating disorders and everything has an emotional component.
Right.
So that's why I left practice in 2004 and then published the Emotion Code book in 2007 because people needed to know, I felt, how to do this.
Yeah.
And I had developed during those years this really simple way of getting rid of that emotional baggage. And that's what we call the Emotion Code.
Yeah. Well,
and to understand, let me just explain one more thing to your listeners, and that is that to understand how this works, you have to realize, first of all, that our bodies are really made of energy. And so if you look at your hand, for example, your hand looks solid, but if you were to magnify it with a big enough microscope, eventually you get to a point where you'd realize, you're looking at an atom and the next atom's a long distance away and there's nothing in the atom. We're just made of energy.
Right.
And so when we are experiencing an intense emotion, that's a particular frequency of energy. All emotions have their own frequency. And sometimes that energy is too much for the body to process and it gets stuck in the body. And so a trapped emotion is like a little ball of energy, a little ball of anger or resentment or grief or sadness or whatever it might be. And so that's how these things work. And when you develop these, and we all have these, they'll tend to stay with you forever. And then eventually they can start causing all kinds of symptoms. So,
right. Well, and so a couple of things but the first thing, which doesn't really have anything to do with like the healing piece of it, but to touch on, I've had that same experience as a health coach, but as a private track coach. I do a lot of, as a runner myself, I coach a lot of athletes in high school, especially. And I've had that same thing happen where I go out to a workout with somebody and I know exactly what I'm going to do. And they come to me and they're like, oh, I've got this, issue that started creeping up, or they're not able to go through the workout. And I'm like, what do I do? And I just ask for help. And all of a sudden it just happens. And I've told their parents sometimes, I'm like, I don't know how I do it. I just figure out like, oh, well, if you're doing this wrong, if you fix that, then you're going to have more efficiency and you're going to be able to run better and da da da.
Cool.
But I think part of that though happens because when you're in a positive energy state from a health standpoint, like it's easier for you to be in tune and in touch with God or whatever people call it, like, and so I tell people like I have a really good connection because my body's in tune and I can hear and feel those emotions and feelings and powers and energies and all of that stuff. Um, Whereas somebody who's not got that situation going on and has got all these other, not that I don't have baggage, I know I have baggage, everybody does,
Sure.
but people that are blocked up with it and then it's showing in disease and things like that. Like, do you see that those people have a harder time like connecting both with other people and with nature in the universe and everything?
Well, what's interesting is that the emotional baggage that we have, you can think of it as remember that every trapped emotion is about the size of a softball, the size, maybe a
Mhm.
baseball. And the average person has probably 300 or so of
Mhm.
these. And so if you can imagine, when we come into this world, for the most part, if you think of our being in terms of energy, each one of us is pretty much a blank slate.
Right.
Like you think of us as being like a clear, pristine, clean energy field. But then life starts to happen, and then pretty soon, instead of having like a blue sky sort of a thing going on, we end up having all these little dark areas, these little dark clouds. And so pretty soon, you get to be, 30, 40 years old, and that energy field that used to be clear and pristine and clean now is like a cloudy day, maybe like a stormy day,
Right.
maybe like a hurricane going on.
Mhm.
And as we start to remove these dark clouds of energy in the body, because that's really kind of what they're like, each one is like a little ball of angst. As we remove these, what happens is people's vibration starts to rise,
Mhm.
and their ability to love others increases, and their ability to just naturally feel feelings of peace and joy and happiness, those that starts to increase as well, and they start to
Right.
become more able to access those kinds of feelings. And so it's really it's a fascinating thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we've had people who have told us, that for the first time in their life, they know what the emotion of love is,
Mhm.
or that they know what it feels like now to feel joy, or to feel the love of the creator, the higher power for them. I mean, it's really an amazing thing. But you're right. It's all about that vibration and changing where people are now, and
Mhm.
bringing them back, I think, to where they're supposed to be, in a
Yeah.
sense.
Well, and and nobody really knows where they're supposed to be if they're dealing with all those things, right? Because they're stuck
Um,
in that. Like, I love that analogy of like it's just a cloudy day. You can't see very far. You can't see, you know, what's off in the distance to be able to go like, oh, it's such a beautiful landscape. Like you're
yeah,
just stuck in it's pouring down rain right in front of me. What am I going to do?
yeah, exactly right. It's kind of like the Peanuts character that always had a
Hmm.
cloud over his head. It was
Yeah.
always like raining in his world.
Yeah. So,
That's how it is for most people,
yeah.
because we're all carrying around, the baggage. And see, the thing is, that emotional baggage is oftentimes not only from your own life,
Hmm.
but we now know that we inherit emotional energy at
Right.
conception from our mom or dad, and they might have, inherited that at conception from
Right.
their mom or dad, and those energies can go back a long way.
Yeah.
And so the lives that we're living here now in the present can be affected in very powerful ways by emotional energies that might have actually been contracted several hundred years ago,
Yeah.
from, maybe your great 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 grandmother was jilted at the altar, and that emotion of grief was so powerful, that energy's been passing down the line. And
Hmm.
that may be the biggest reason why you are having a hard time finding love, because of that.
Yeah.
Or, maybe some ancestor was thrown in the poorhouse, and you struggle with money now,
Hmm.
and you can't figure out how to get ahead. And it can
Right.
be because of that,
Yeah.
uh, those old emotions, which is really, and that's also part of the emotion code, to be able to find and release those. It's
Right.
actually very easy, and a lot of fun.
And so with that connection to health and that instantaneous healing piece, is it at some level, is it because like, okay, if I'm dealing with all of these things and I've got all these traumas and emotional baggage that I'm dealing with, as soon as I release that from a cellular health standpoint, is it like, oh, well, if my immune system doesn't have to deal with that anymore, now I can actually go and attack this issue that's been going on and get rid of it? Because, I know from a strictly anatomy, physiology way your cell works, if you feed it the right things, it's going to take care of itself because it wants to survive.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, the way that I look at it is, well, let me tell you a story, actually. This is a great example. A guy came into me many years ago with really severe low back pain. It's like a 9 on a 0 to 10 scale.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd been going on for a number of weeks. And I tested him using the emotion code. And of course, that involves muscle testing. So if you can imagine, he's holding his arm out parallel to the floor. I'm asking questions, and I'm getting strong answers from his body for yeses, and weak answers, or his arm goes weak for no answers. And just to give you, a little bit of an idea how this works.
Yeah.
And so I was testing him, and I found out right away that there was some emotional baggage that was a big factor for his back. It was part of the cause. And so we have a chart of emotions that looks like this. And so I tested to see, where this emotion was, column A, column B, figured it out. And the emotion was anger. And I asked, do we need to know anything else about this? And his subconscious mind responded through his physical body and said, yes, we need to know more. So it was a strong answer. So when that happens, we figure out when it occurred, and it had occurred about 20 years before. Oh, wow. And he immediately said, okay, I remember what that's about. I said, really? He said that he was working for this company, and he was falsely accused of something. And he was just so angry and so hurt about this that he never forgot it. And the anger that was so powerful at that point was more than his body could process. And so it became trapped. Right. And that trapped emotion, again, is like a little ball of energy. Well, these are always going to land somewhere. In his case, it lodged in his low back. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens, coincidentally, that, or interestingly at least, that the low back tends to be associated with money, metaphysically, with the body. And this was about money. He'd been accused, as I recall, of kind of cooking the books, which he didn't do. Yeah. But anyway, so that trapped emotion of anger had been in his back for 20 years. And I think of it this way, okay? The body itself is just a very complex energy field. If you set aside everything that you know about biology, that's all true. But if you look at the body in terms of quantum physics, the body is this very complex energy field. Well, so now there's this emotion, this ball of anger lodged in his low back, probably about the size of a softball, maybe a baseball. What's it doing? Well, it's continually distorting the energy field in that area. Right. And so it's interfering with the chemical reactions in the tissues. It's interfering with all the cells and how they're functioning. It's interfering with the flow of blood and lymph and the flow of acupuncture meridian energy and so on. So anyway, I went ahead and released that trapped emotion. Now, to release a trapped emotion, what we do is if you're working on yourself, you can just take a magnet or you can use your hand, and you just go over the governing meridian a few times. And that's a meridian that begins at the tailbone, goes up over the top of the head to the inside of the upper lip. And if you're working on someone else and you're there with them, you can just slide down the middle of their back. And that's what I did with this guy 3 times. Yeah. And I said, okay, try it now. And so he bends over and he's got no pain. And he bends backward and he twists this way and that way. And he keeps exclaiming, he just can't believe it. It's like a miracle. His mind is blown. And I'm grateful, that it worked so well. Well, the pain never did come back. But here's the interesting thing, okay? When we release a trapped emotion, there's this distorting force going on, and all of a sudden now that's gone. Oof. Right. And so now the tissues can breathe, the energy can flow, the blood can flow, the lymph can flow, and the cells can function normally, and all those chemical reactions that were being interfered with now are functioning normally. So pain goes away.
Yeah.
Oftentimes instantly, not always, but oftentimes it does. But here's the other side of the coin. This guy, a couple of days later, came back in to see me, and he said, Dr. Nelson, my back pain is still gone. It hasn't bothered me at all. He said, I still can't believe it.
Yeah.
He said, when I came in here, I had another problem, another issue that I did not tell you about. And he said, for about as long as I can remember, I've always been kind of a rageaholic. He said, I've been wired really, really tight, and I got to watch the road rage. I've had to go to anger management a few times,
Yeah.
And he said, it hasn't really helped me. But he said, since you released that trapped emotion of anger, I feel really, really different. Things that used to set me off don't set me off. I just feel kind of relaxed and kind of peaceful. He said, how'd you do that? And at the time I said, well, I don't really know. But now think about it. Okay. What we now know is that this ball of anger in this guy's back, this trapped emotion, was vibrating at that frequency of anger. Every emotion has a frequency. So when a situation would come along where he might tend to feel the emotion of anger, he would. Why? Well, he'd feel it more easily, more rapidly than he would have otherwise, because part of his body was already feeling that energy, which is really weird. But this is the reality of how our bodies work on a quantum level.
Yeah. So is this my immediate thought to that right you just finished was like the people that we all know people that say like, oh, I met that person and I had this feeling in my back or in my stomach or in my that I've never gotten before, like this be careful, watch out. Like is that reading their energy and going, this is the same energy as the guy or girl or trauma that happened, your body's feeling, going, whoa, back off. Like, is that similar to what's maybe happening there?
Yeah, it could be. It could be, sure, because our subconscious minds are vastly more intelligent than we can even really, I think, begin to imagine.
Right.
And in fact, I think that it is the subconscious mind within each one of us that is keeping us alive and is connected to, to the source energy that's keeping everything alive. And I think that, that can definitely happen. That can be part of it. Our bodies are designed to survive. And so that's one of the reasons why we have trapped emotions.
Right.
Some experience happens to us, and the subconscious mind retains that energy. And it's kind of a primitive protective mechanism, I think, so that if something similar happens, all of our senses go off and our hackles go up, because it might be the same thing. But most of the time, it doesn't really work out that well. But that's also the inheritance aspect of this too. They figure this out with animals. They know that if an animal has a traumatic experience, it'll somehow pass that memory or something about that down its line to help protect its posterity.
Right.
And that's inherited trapped emotions. Now we know that.
Yeah. And so I think everybody can relate to and understand that the trauma piece and trapping that in, whether we're on purpose squashing it down and not wanting to deal with it, or if it's just the subconscious doing it. Does it also happen with positive emotions?
It can happen with positive emotions, but not very often. It's usually the negative ones. On our chart, in fact, we have let's see, it's in column B, row 1, right here. We have the emotion of overjoy. And so if you have a trapped emotion from a positive emotion, like you get too overly excited or something, or you're just so happy, it kind of short circuits you. These are unusual. You can kind of see why. Most of the time, it's negative emotions that most of us deal with. They'll show up here. So they do show up, but they are kind of rare, kind of unusual.
Okay. And I would think because we deal with so much negative stuff that when we have the positive, it's sort of outweighing and balancing out our energy a little bit for a short period of time. And then we go back into that negative spin cycle that we get into in focusing on all the negative stuff, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's, I think essentially it's it's kind of effortless for us
Mm-hmm.
to feel the negative emotions that are below the waterline as far as the emotions.
Right.
It's easy for us to feel the resentment and anger and so on. It actually takes effort to stay above the waterline and to, at least initially, to have those positive emotions. And, Dr. Oh gosh, what was his name? He wrote the book called Power versus Force. He came up with a scale of consciousness, and that's kind of how his scale looks. You got lower emotions below the line,
Mm-hmm.
And the lower down you go, the lower the vibration of those emotions. The lowest emotion, by the way, that's on our chart, and that he also David Hawkins was his name.
Oh yeah.
He talked about also shame, and if you're in a state of total shame, there's no lower emotion than that. And so people that are in that state will often take their own lives because there's no lower emotion to gravitate downward to.
Right.
And initially, it takes effort to stay above the waterline and to have those positive emotions and feel those. And what's interesting is that the more emotional baggage you have, the more those are like weights that are kind of anchoring you,
Mm-hmm.
or pulling you down into those lower levels. And so the more you can cut those ropes loose and get rid of those emotions, the more you tend to rise on the scale of consciousness into those higher levels and those higher frequencies. And that's where we all want to be.
Yeah.
We all want to be able to feel peace, and we all, no matter what's going on around us. And we all want to be able to give love and receive love, and especially unconditional love. And when people die and they go to the other side, they're often asked, how much knowledge did you gain, and how much love were you able to develop for your fellow beings in the world?
Right.
They're never asked, how much money they made, or how fancy of a house they lived in. It's never that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so is there a way to, or and because it snowballs, right? Like the if you don't deal with it and you are in this state of, whether you put yourself there or not, like this state of always experiencing traumas, which I know some people are in situations in life where that just happens. It's just part of their life. Do the individual energy traumas, do they shrink or grow in size, or is it just like that's that size, it's going to stay that way until you actually get rid of it?
Well, I think that there are times when things can be released spontaneously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for example, many people who have had body work done, can tell you that on occasions people will have some kind of an emotional experience. They might be on the table getting a massage, and what the massage therapist says, the issues are in the tissues, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so maybe they're getting a certain area of their body worked. They may have a memory that comes back to them, and as that energy is being released, they may cry, and they'll find all of a sudden that area of the body that was really tight or in a certain knot now is gone, and their pain has gone away, and so on. The thing about it is, you can't make an appointment with a massage therapist, for example, and be guaranteed that you're going to have some emotional energy released. Unless maybe that massage therapist has been trained in the emotion code, then that's a different thing. But that's the nice thing about the emotion code, is that anybody can do it. It's really simple. It's really fast. And in fact, it's easy enough that kids are learning how to do it around the world and having great success. Oh, wow. Yeah. So it's really a game changer in that way, because you don't necessarily have to go to see a practitioner. Now, you can do it yourself. Mm-hmm. We've certified over 12,000, probably almost 13,000 people now in many, many countries around the world to do this work.
Yeah.
And you can find a practitioner on our website at discoverhealing.com, but you can also just read the book, and the information's all in there. You can do it yourself.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it's not something that you have to like be a rocket scientist to figure out. It's just understanding. And and I would imagine allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to go, okay, this is the real issue, and not trying to mask it with like, oh, I'm going to try to deal with this, but it's, deep down there was something else.
Well, right, exactly. It's being open to the possibility
Mhm.
that maybe there are other answers in other places.
Right.
You know, Western medicine, obviously, uh, especially the pharmaceutical medicine and the pharmaceutical companies would like you to believe that pharmacy, you know, big pharma is the only way to go.
Right.
That that you need vaccines to be healthy,
Yeah.
and if you don't get enough vaccines, you're going to die. And if you're a baby coming into the world, you need, I don't know how many there are now, 40
Yeah, it's crazy.
different vaccines that you need to be healthy in this world.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with that. See,
Yeah.
But it's about being open to the possibility that maybe life is actually divine. And in other words, that we are divine beings,
Mhm.
and that maybe that higher power might come up with some better ways for you to take care of yourself and to help
Right.
yourself and help your loved ones. Because that's exactly what this is.
Yeah.
I mean, it isn't about me, but I had that habit of asking for help with every person that I saw. It's a totally private, totally personal habit.
Right.
But answers came,
Mhm.
and so my job is to just bring this healing methodology into the world because we really need it.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. The longer I live, the more I realize that it's really so true that we're divine beings that are born into this world. Our memories have been completely wiped
Mhm.
of anything that we knew before. And so here we are, and it's like a perfect testing ground.
Right.
It's like the Matrix, right? We we get put into this place where we have no memories of who we were, and we get to choose whatever we're going to choose. We get to choose good, bad, light, dark, good, evil. We
Yeah.
learn the consequences of our choices, and then we die.
Right.
And it's like, that's what we take with us, what we've learned, right? So
Yeah.
it's really for us. And I saw a near-death experience the other day where this guy was talking about how he realized after coming back that life is just this incredible gift. It's a
Mhm.
gift for us, and we get this shot at it, and we want to maximize our time, and we want to do as much as we can with our life and touch as many other lives as we can while we're here. And what our emotional baggage does, you see, and the reason why this is so important is it anchors us to those low energies and keeps us from ascending, and it keeps us from really being able to develop, or at least it interferes greatly with our ability to develop unconditional love.
Right.
And that's, I think, the most important thing
Yeah.
that we can do while we're here is to develop our ability to love others unconditionally.
Mhm.
And it's such a powerful thing. It's really,
Yeah.
really amazing.
Well, and you sort of described the analogy that I was going to bring up, in that, like, if we can get ourselves to help everybody else, and we raise the tide, all the ships raise up because we're raising the tide, right?
Yeah,
And like, if
absolutely.
you're not anchored down, then you can rise up with the tide as it rises. And if we're all finding that positive energy and continuing to raise up, then it makes the world a better place for everybody.
Yeah, yeah,
You know?
exactly right. And in
And
quantum physics, I mean, we learn we truly are all connected. Something that people have been
Mhm.
talking about for a long, long time. But now, in quantum physics, the physicists are finding out. Oh, okay, this is how faith actually works. This is real. We are all connected,
Right.
and yeah, it's an amazing time to be alive, I think. And the world, as I see it, the world is kind of in a state of the world is in labor, trying to
Mhm.
bring forth this new existence that's right around the corner from
Yeah.
us. And it has to do with these things that
Yeah.
that you're talking about, raising the vibration of everybody,
Right.
and changing the whole vibration of the world. And what's interesting is that the ancestors of ours that have passed on. This world belongs to them as well as us.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only physically dead. They're not spiritually dead. They're still around. And you find that out, when you read the book. But animals as well. A good friend of mine, Marie Holiday, who is from Spain, she runs this conference that she does every couple of years in the UK called the Animal World Energy Healing Conference. And she started those because she heard a voice one day that said, "You cannot transform the planet unless you bring the animals along with you."
Right.
Think about it, because the world belongs to them too, and they get emotional baggage. There's a whole chapter in the Emotion Code book about animals and how you can use this to work on your animals and clear their baggage as well. Really fun.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, and it's for people that have, usually I would say I see it more. We've adopted 2 of the dogs that we've had in our house as older dogs. They were both around 2 to 3 years old. One of them we just got in December. It was a Christmas present for the kids. But 2.5-year-old Min Pin, and going through that cycle of like, okay, why is she barking at that person? Why is this person triggering her? Why is that movement triggering her? Different things that she brought from her previous life that obviously we know a little bit about, but not everything that happened throughout the whole 2.5 years that she's experienced. And now it's probably been about 2 months that we've brought her in, and she's starting to get rid of some of those other things because we've brought her in, we cuddle her, we take care of her, we provide for her, we massage her, love on her, tell her it's okay, and I'm sure that we're releasing some of that baggage for her. There's still some, because she still does some of it, but that's the same way that we act as people. Like when we get into a new group, in all of us, we bring all that baggage, and nobody knows we've got all this stuff, and unless we just start vomiting it from the mouth as we talk to people, which none of us do. But we get into a new group, and all of a sudden we identify ourselves as this person of that group automatically.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're all cut from the same cloth, and we're all susceptible to trapped emotional energies.
Mm-hmm.
Animals are, we are, we operate just the same as they do. In fact, it's interesting because we use the same exact chart of emotions for animals as we do for human beings.
Really?
Yep. There's no difference.
Yeah.
And in fact, some of the most touching things that I've seen in my life have actually been with animals, working with animals and releasing their trapped emotions.
Yeah.
So dogs, cats. I've worked on quite a few horses over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been an amazing thing. In fact, when people get certified in the Emotion Code, part of the requirements are that you have to work on a minimum number of animals, because you work on, I think it's 5 animals you need to work with. If you work on 5 animals and use the Emotion Code, you're going to see some amazing things happen.
Yeah.
And so we want everybody to have that experience. And now we have people who just specialize in working with animals only.
Yeah.
In fact, we have one of our practitioners who lives in France and works with thoroughbred racehorses around the world remotely, because of course this is done at a distance, as well as live and in person.
Yeah.
And I understand that she does really well, and has a lot of great experiences with these horses. So, somebody from Dubai or, somewhere else, the Kentucky Derby, they'll call her up and they'll say, "Hey, can you work on our horse because we're having an issue?" And she works on them from wherever she is. And that's another thing about this. When you go to discoverhealing.com, our website, you'll see a map of practitioners around the world. And most of these practitioners work with other people. Their clients are all over the world. Yeah. And a lot of those clients, they will probably never actually meet in person, but many of those clients will have had their lives changed from that work. So it's really, we're in the 21st century now. So welcome to the 21st century.
Right. Well, and that's just again a testament to the healing piece of energy. That like it doesn't have to be you come to my office and sit down and we touch each other to feel your issue or heal your issue or whatever. It can be that, but it also can be just, we just have to deal with the energy in your room, in your space, in your body, and heal that. And
It's all quantum physics.
yeah,
And so with quantum physics, energy can change and shift, and it doesn't have to take a long time. It can happen instantly.
right.
And so that, yeah, it does happen.
Yeah. And then, and to go back a little bit, because you also said this and it triggered it in my head that like that the thought process, and a lot of people will say, like, okay, well, diseases, when, you go to the doctor and they say, what's your family history of da, 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 and they're looking for it. And like, yes, there is the genetic basis for some things to be transferred down, da, da, da. But it's more likely from a disease standpoint, especially the chronic diseases, that it's either going to come from the what you were taught in how to eat, how to exercise, or the energy around what you were, the household you were brought up in.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then also if you think about the diseases that are considered genetic diseases, what we're seeing with those is there are always these inherited components to those diseases, inherited emotional energies and traumas and things that have been passing down the line.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing some really fascinating things happen, even with genetic diseases. In Western medicine, if you have a genetic disease, that's considered hopeless, right?
Right.
Because it's genetic. But, I'm reminded of the study that was done where they took a man who had Brooks disease, which is where your skin, these people don't live very long. And these are the people that they would play the reptile man in the circus,
Right.
years ago. They would have scales on their skin and they would bleed and so on. So they wouldn't live usually past about 25 because they develop infections and so on.
Right.
Totally genetic disease, totally incurable, right? And so they did this study where they took this guy and they put him under deep hypnosis. And under deep hypnosis, they started telling him that he was getting better and that he was recovering. And the guy made a complete and full recovery. Well, how do you explain that? Well, here's another one. They found that people who have full-blown type 1 diabetes, who they've done studies where people who have multiple personalities will have full-blown type 1 diabetes in one personality, but when they shift into another personality, they don't have it anymore. They're in the same body. How do you explain that?
Right.
Well, it's all quantum physics.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting because it's, and obviously your brain plays a part, your subconscious plays a part, all the, everything that you've experienced plays a part, the energy around all of those experiences. But it does all come down to energy and how the energy flows. And if your energy is flowing in a positive direction and you're taking care of your energy, which I think a lot of people don't understand that they need to take care of their energy. And like, if you're doing those things, then you get sick a lot less frequently. You tend to get the things that you like want to experience in your life as far as peaceful and joyful and all those things. And I'm saying that because I've experienced it myself over the past few years as I've gotten more and more into understanding my own health and how much energy plays a part in it, and grounding myself and doing all the different things that I need to do to make sure that my energy stays balanced.
Yeah, well, and if you think about the body in terms of energy hygiene, the biggest energy imbalance by far that people have is their emotional baggage. And so what we find is that when people start to remove that baggage, all kinds of things can get better. All kinds of things can improve, even things that were unexpected, that they could never have anticipated might improve. Those things can improve too.
Yeah.
And so it isn't just about, with the emotion code, it's not just about feeling better physically, although people do when they start getting rid of their emotional baggage. But it also creates this shift in it'll create personality shifts, and always for the better.
Right.
And things like depression and anxiety and phobias and, PTSD and panic attacks and all those things also tend to just disappear.
Yeah.
So
well, and so many of those things are linked to traumas.
they are. And, it's interesting because in the body code is the follow-on book that I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
The emotion code book looks like this.
Right.
The body code is the second book that I wrote that came out in early last year.
Okay.
And this book is really all about all of the different kinds of imbalances that cause the symptoms that we suffer from. So if you look at this page, there's 6 different icons representing the 6 different categories of imbalances that cause trouble for us.
Yeah.
And up here at the top, we have what we call energies. And those are things like trapped emotions and traumas.
Right.
But then we have things like pathogens and misalignments and imbalances of nutrition and toxicity and imbalances in the circuitry and the systems of the body. And so it's so interesting because during those years, the last 10 years of my practice, most of the people that I saw had been told there's really no help for them at all, no cure for them at all. But what I found is that by communicating with the subconscious mind of a person, which is what we teach people how to do in these books, that the subconscious mind of the individual always knew what was needed for them to be able to get well. Mm-hmm. And so by asking questions and getting answers, I was able to figure out how to address those needs and fix the things that needed to be fixed and give the body what it needed to be healthy and help the body to cleanse from whatever it needed to be cleansed from. Yeah. And so the vast majority of those people were able to get well in fairly short order too.
Right.
And so yeah, there's more going on than just the emotional, but that is that I found to be the single biggest common denominator for everybody.
Yeah.
And so that's why we started off with the emotion code book, because people needed to know that emotional baggage is such a big thing. It's huge.
Well, and once you start once you see results from something, I mean, it's like with everything in life, once you start seeing results with something, you go, oh, okay, let's try a little more of that, right? Like, which that can be a positive and a negative, right? Because it can lead you to addiction of things. But when you're healing yourself and you're feeling that positive result on the positive energy, it wants to continue to go that direction.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned the website, discoverhealing.com. And I'm assuming the books are there. Your books are on Amazon.
Yeah, the books are on Amazon, Audible, Barnes and Noble, wherever you like to buy books, they're available there. They're available in many languages. Got on the wall behind me some of the languages the books have been printed in. And
nice.
I just bought a bunch more frames so I can frame more books. They send me books all the time. I don't know what to do with them. I got to run this selling up books. So I'm hanging them up on the wall.
That's funny. So people, I'll put those links in the show notes so people can connect with you and get in touch with you, or find somebody that's been trained in either their area or just somebody they can connect with through the website.
Yeah, they can go to discoverhealing.com. And we have 3 levels of certification now. We have the emotion code, we have the body code, and we also have another level called the belief code, which is where we train people how to find the subconscious beliefs that are being held by the body and identify those and remove those.
Yeah.
We're having great success with that. It's very exciting.
That's awesome. And so as we finish up, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would tell somebody that like is dealing with that, I'm stuck in this part of my life and I can't seem to get anywhere, whether it's, from a health standpoint, a true health, like physical chronic disease standpoint, or just mental issues or whatever it is that they're stuck and they're feeling, and like what can be their first step to go like, okay, there is an option for you?
Well, if you're feeling stuck mentally or emotionally or physically, my message to you is that there is a whole world of answers for you. Mm-hmm. All the information about what's really going on with you and why you're stuck in any of those ways really lies within you. Your subconscious mind is divine. You can think of it as being like a binary computer. And what we do is we teach people how to get information out of that computer. Mm-hmm. The ultimate resource is your own subconscious mind. And through the emotion code and the body code and the other methods that we teach, you can learn how to do this yourself, or you can find someone that can work with you. And it's time for you to just open your mind to the possibility that maybe there's a better way. Maybe you don't have to stay stuck, and maybe it's not through drugs. Maybe you don't really need the surgery. Maybe there are ways to get well, because I'm here to tell you there are. Yeah. And so open your mind. You can start with the emotion code. It's simple. It's easy. You can try it out. You can go to our website at discoverhealing.com and get some free information about it. And just check it out. And I think you'll find that it's ultimately mind-blowing.
Well, let me tell you, you've solidified some things for me in how the healing process works as you allow your body to take control and do those things. And so I want to thank you for being a guest. And I want to reiterate that if anybody is in that stuck position, they need to check out your website and your books and follow up with somebody if they need to get that extra piece, because once you deal with this stuff, it becomes life is just so much more fun. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on, Jerry.
Of course.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.